Arizona is home to 22 tribal nations and more than 340,000 Native Americans. Arizona State University builds on more than 6 decades of working and partnering with tribal nations and communities. Many of our Native faculty incorporate Indigenous knowledge systems in seeking solutions through a process of community engagement that respects and honors traditional ways of thinking. Together, we are creating community solutions leading to a more equitable future.
This is Indian Country Today.
Leo Senchi Manyavu, thank you for joining us. I'm Karina Dominguez. Today marks the 145th anniversary of the Battle of Greasy Grass. It is a historic event marked by commemorations all over Indian country. Details are scarce on exactly how Lieutenant Colonel George Custer died during the battle, but the general facts are known. 600 Army troops attempted to sneak attack an encampment of as many as 2,000 Cheyenne, Lakota, and Arapaho warriors. The warriors defeated Custer and his forces, while elders and children were able to escape. This year, the Sacred Pipe Resource Center in North Dakota will be taking 17 Native youth to a reenactment at the battle site in Montana. Cheryl Carey is the executive director of the Resource Center. Carey explains the importance of Native youth seeing this reenactment and understanding this part of history.
We need to understand the story from our perspective as Native people, and I don't think a lot of young people get that in school or from their families or anything like that. And so I just thought it would be a wonderful opportunity, a learning opportunity for them to, go and really find out the story. And especially this weekend, because they do the historical reenactment.
During the 3-day trip, the group will also attend Native Days. They will be able to see the Indian horse relays and the Ultimate Warrior competitions. Indigenous Brazilians continue to clash with police outside the National Congress building in the country's capital. In an effort to save their lands, tribal people are protesting proposed mining and logging legislation. The legislation by the Brazilian government would legalize mining and logging in tribal territories. Police are cracking down on land defenders with tear gas bombs and rubber bullets. Turimata Pataco and his family came there to sing, but were hit with pepper spray and rubber bullets.
The sun was very strong, and we wanted to go to the shadow, and they, the police, blocked our passage to sing. So they started shooting pepper spray and rubber bullets at us. I was with my wife and my kids next to me, 11 and 14 years old.
Voting on the controversial measure was postponed again by lawmakers, and it is unclear if Congress will proceed with the measure. Tribal groups have been staging daily protests outside of Congress since the legislation was introduced last week. Indigenous leader Dina Matuka says illegal mining and logging have caused violent clashes between tribes and illegal operations.
For decades, we have faced violence in our territories, with land demarcation paralyzed, with miners' invasion, violence, leaders being killed, and then we come to denounce precisely what is happening inside our territories, and we have to face the same situation.
Demonstrations in Brazil's capital are expected to continue through the end of the month, when the Supreme Court is scheduled to make a ruling. The Coast Miwok in Northern California are objecting to a plan to kill elk. They are sending a formal letter to Interior Secretary Deb Haaland objecting to the plan by the National Park Service. They say it prioritizes cattle ranching over indigenous tule elk at Point Reyes National Seashore in California. They say cattle and farm equipment are harming native wildlife, water, and habitat. Joe Sanchez, who is the council's treasurer, says the elk have a long tie to the land.
Well, they're indigenous, just as we are. We have a 10,000 plus history on that land. And we want to see the land healthy. and not disturbed and with pesticides and carbon and methane gas, and we want these things eliminated and the land brought back to its more original state.
The plan is overwhelmingly opposed by members of the public. More than 50,000 comments were submitted to the Park Service and the California Coastal Commission during the environmental review. 3 people were arrested Monday at a prayer lodge along the Mississippi River near an Enbridge construction site. According to the Atkin County Sheriff's Office, 3 people were charged with misdemeanor trespass and remained in custody late as of Tuesday. Police did not release their names. Water protectors say there is a heavy law enforcement presence near the prayer lodge. To read more of this story, check out our website at indiancountrytoday.com and search for the title, More Arrests Along Enbridge Line 3. And those are the headlines for Indian Country Today. I'm Karina Dominguez. Mark, it's the 25th anniversary of Canada's Indigenous Peoples Day.
That's right, Karina. And visitors are back on the road. We'll also be taking a look at a Pulitzer Prize finalist for cartoons.
This is Indian Country Today.
It's summertime, and with vaccinations, folks are feeling more confident about taking in the sights on tribal lands. Sherry L. Rupert works with tribes and entrepreneurs at the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association. Visitors will see some changes since COVID-19 put a halt to tourism.
Well, I think this is an opportunity to improve. We've seen across the country that tribes are spending millions of dollars to be able to tell their story, and they're doing that through their cultural centers. So we've seen many that are coming online. The Mandan Hidatsa Arikara Nation opened their interpretive center in May. The Choctaw Cultural Center is coming online in July, First Americans Museum in September, and the Agua Caliente Cultural Center in 2022. So, it's all about telling their story. They know that they're not going to make a ton of money on these cultural centers, but it's an opportunity to tell the world who they are. It's all really up to them on what they decide. But what we try to convey is that, this is an opportunity to tell your story the way that you want to tell it, and also an opportunity to manage the number of people coming onto your reservations, and also to manage the areas in which they're visiting. If there are sacred places to your tribe and you don't want to share them, you don't have to share them. And so we really encourage them to really take a look at what they're willing to share and what they don't want to share. When we invite visitors to our communities and we're teaching them about who we are, our children are listening and they're learning as well. As you get more visitors, you begin to understand what they're looking for, what they like. And we know that, people like to shop. They like to take something back with them to be able to share with their family and their friends. And so shops like the Tradition store that I was just talking about with these beautiful earrings and many other things that she had in her store is an opportunity to buy something from that place and take that back with you to share.
Many tribes are close to national parks. How does that relationship work?
We work very closely with the National Park Service. We have a few agreements with them, and really doing the outreach to the tribes and working with both parties to make sure that the tribal story is told, and told in a way that is authentic, coming from the tribes themselves. For so many years, I've seen in the cultural centers within the national parks really kind of a one-sided story. But now we have the opportunity to work very closely with them and with the tribes for them to tell their stories.
Thanks, Sherry Rupert, American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association. Karina Dominguez is on the road to the Tribeca Film Festival in New York City. She caught up with the star of Catch the Fair One.
She's known as boxing world champion Kaylee K.O. Rees. Now she's trying her hand at acting. At the world premiere of her debut acting performance in Catch the Fair One, Rees wore a custom design by Hunkpapa Lakota designer Kayla Looking Horse.
I'm just so excited to have everybody see the film, and just, we need things like this in front of non-Indigenous eyes so we can bring that awareness. More awareness may lead to some kind of preventative actions.
The film is a revenge thriller about a Native American boxer who gets involved with human traffickers in an effort to locate her missing sister.
There's a lot of parallels in the film with my real life, but it's just a creative expression to really bring awareness to this issue.
In the film, the former boxer retraces the steps of her kid sister to find the man responsible for her disappearance.
It was really important for us, both myself and Joseph, to really have the audience feel the rage, the sense of loss, the sense of hopelessness, the sense of sadness.
In real life, Reese is still training and chasing boxing titles, but this has opened a new door.
And I've been trying and wanting to get into acting since I was younger, especially something to do life after boxing.
The film is one of 8 that featured Indigenous stories and storytellers at the 2021 Tribeca Festival. In New York, Karina Dominguez, Indian Country Today.
In Canada, Indigenous Peoples Day is celebrated in June. Lena Minifee tells us more.
Indigenous Peoples Day in the US is a relatively new thing that's sort of replacing Columbus Day and this concept of sort of a founder that came and discovered, as we all know, that didn't really discover Turtle Island. In Canada, it's different. It actually started in sort of a call in the 1940s during World War II by Jules Suey and the chiefs from across Turtle Island that he had brought together for the first delegation of 50 chiefs to talk to government, and they hadn't done that since the treaties. And there was a push then for him, and he had said that we'd like to have Indian Day on June 21st, the solstice. So it actually came back from the 1940s. It's quite different because there's sort of this national recognition and federal recognition of the day. And I think that in the States, it's kind of state by state and city by city who chooses to kind of enter it or not.
Lena, we've all been shocked about the discovery of many unknown graves at residential schools in Canada. Our hearts go out to you and your First Nations relatives at this time of remembrance and honor.
Well, I have to say that everybody has been absolutely impacted, and our lives have kind of been brutally changed forever with the findings of Tecumloops and the 215 children there. But now there's been Brandon, Manitoba, and now that there's finally people are paying attention to the Regina Industrial Indian School with their grave findings as well. Everybody has been completely impacted by this, especially talking to residential school survivors who now have to, that brings up all of these issues again. So I don't think it's gonna, as I said, we're not having Indigenous Day celebrations in the same way right now. I think a lot of people are doing ceremony and sort of acknowledging and taking time to deal with this kind of work, which is emotional, spiritual work. There are places that are not celebrating Canada Day. I think that's what's going to be more affected, is like the city of Victoria saying that they're gonna not go ahead with Canada Day celebrations in regards to the findings of these murdered and missing kids. And I think that a lot of people are following suit and being like, celebrating Canada is not appropriate this time. Indigenous Day, a lot of people have found their own ways, and I'm assuming they'll be finding their own ways through ceremony or spending time with family and friends and their elders. But this is a huge ripple that's coming through community. And if it wasn't COVID, I would say that maybe even celebrations would kind of take a complete turn and move into a different kind of space. Looking up the stats about people who knew and about residential school children who were murdered and who was had no idea. There's actually a survey, like a public survey that went out last week, and it turns out like 10% of people in Canada don't really believe it, are deniers, which is better than I expected. But like at least 30% said that they knew of something, but they didn't know the deep details, and 20 to 25% of people are completely shocked and are now aware of it. So I think those numbers are changing since the National Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Of course, in the fourth volume of that Truth and Reconciliation, they had said that through the testimonies of all the residential school survivors, they had suspected about 4,000 kids to have been missing and killed or deceased in some way. And, you know, Senator Murray Sinclair was quite surprised that people didn't read the fourth volume of that report, and kind of that news didn't come out within the news when the TRC ended. So that this is something to our communities that isn't new, but I think to the greater population of Canada, you know, newcomers, immigrants, settlers, refugees, settlers, that they didn't get the details or really understand this, or didn't really hit home until this kind of evidence has come forward, which is unfortunate because our elders have been saying this for so long, and our survivors have been saying this repeatedly out loud over and over and over again, in every way they've been able to say it, that their family's missing, their brothers or sisters are missing in schools, that they knew people who just passed, who were dead within their schools, and now it's finally hitting after saying it over and over again at this point.
Lena Menifee from Vancouver, British Columbia. When we come back, a Lakota cartoonist who is a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Marty Two Bulls is an award-winning cartoonist. He was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. He didn't win. In fact, nobody won. The reason? No consensus pick emerged. Marty's primary client is the South Dakota-based Lakota Times. The Pulitzer Board described his work as innovative and insightful cartoons that offer a Native American perspective on the contemporary news events. We talked to him last week.
It's a bit confusing having never been in a situation before where a prize wasn't awarded that you entered a contest for. So kind of unique. Right. So how did the other cartoonists get together and decide to send a unified message that this wasn't right? Well, I met the other cartoonists in the past. You know, we've crossed paths here and there. And so I just got a hold of them, and we had a long discussion via email, and this cartoon kind of came out of that discussion. So we decided that it was a good way to respond without having a written response. We decided to do it in our medium. What went into your thinking on that cartoon? Did you want to use the same kind of commentary that you would on anything else? Yeah, you know, we started talking about who the winner actually was, and you know, they were talking about a recount, and we were joking around about bamboo in the ballads, and then I just said, well, Trump won, so it just and then I did a sketch of it just for fun between us, and then we decided to run it, decided to finish it. So just to be clear about the process, everybody who is entered is a nominee, and then there's a team of, includes cartoonists, of a jury pool that actually select the 3 finalists, and then it's the board of the trustees of the Pulitzers that make the final decision. You went through all the way the process. It was the board that didn't agree to a winner. Could that process be improved? I think that's basically the problem with it, is that the people that are judging our work are non-cartoonists. You know, most of them are writers, journalists, and from the academia. And they have no idea what it is to be an artist or to be a cartoonist. And to have them judge our work seems to me backwards in a lot of ways. You know, they were the same people who would turn down our work, who would edit our work, who would say, oh, you need to add this and this and such. And they'd make our work not funny anymore. You know, they were the editors, they were the gatekeepers. And now with this contest, there they are again. One of the extraordinary thing about cartooning as a storytelling mechanism is that you can distill complex ideas in a few words and images. How do you go about that craft? You know, as you're saying, you know, I used to write editorials for the Rapid City Journal, and we never signed those things. So we just did them day after day, but nobody read those things. And so I found that a cartoon, people will stop and read, you know, and I remember a quote, and I think it was Dalai Lama who once said that you can change a person's mind through laughter. And so that's always in the back of my mind when I do these cartoons. I try to do it for fun, and make people laugh, maybe change their minds, or maybe at least make them think.
How did you start doing cartoons?
I started actually in high school for my high school newspaper, the Pine Needle, and but I never thought I'd do it as a profession or even later in life, you know. But of course, what high school student does, you know, see the pitfalls or hints of our future, and so I just always did cartoons and drawings even prior to that. You know, my family, my friends, my cousins. So it's just kind of a long progression. But it wasn't until later I started to study the craft and understand how it works and how it reads.
Well, and it is a craft, and it has such a long, rich history. How do you get ideas?
Well, I came out of newspapers, so consequently you kind of become a news hound. So you're always reading about the news and what's coming up. And as you read, these ideas come to you, you know. You say, oh, that sounds funny, or this guy did something that wasn't, you know, that could be made fun of, something I could draw upon, you know, something I could bring attention to. Or sometimes it's just something happened in politics that I think that is really wrong or egregious. I'll put something out there to address it.
Do you find it harder to draw in any particular era? I mean, we've gone through the Trump era to now the Biden era. There are plenty of material in both times?
Yeah, but I think the last administration, it was just so much easier. It almost wrote itself, you know. Sometimes I'd be halfway through a cartoon, and then I'd see a press release of something the administration did, and I'd completely change gears, you know, because this is much more funnier, you know. But sadly, it was actually happening, you know. And I think that's one thing that I remember most about this last administration is that they devalued, or seemed to devalue, that office.
Tell us about a couple of the cartoons that are popular.
It was a cartoon I did about St. Patrick's Day, and I was a native guy sitting next to an Irish guy, and he's basically saying, you know, I have a great Irish. Well, my great grandmother was an Irish princess, and he looks a little perturbed, you know. And I wanted to play on the opposites of that, where I don't know how many times I've heard it, and I'm sure many Indians and our audience have heard it too, where somebody claims to have a Indian princess in their lineage somewhere. The other cartoon, Will Pilgrim for Food, makes light of how, you know, of course, the homelessness that's going on in the United States right now is an epidemic, but also I wanted to allure the fact that the Pilgrims came here in much the same way. You know, they were destitute and poor, and if it wasn't for the Native Americans in that area, they probably would have starved to death.
You know, Marty, I think of sitting in a classroom and a teacher saying, don't draw that, don't pay attention to the studies, and yet it's the people who are in the back of the room drawing things in their margins and coming up that are really opening up creativity that create professions like yours. So a tribute to those who don't obey by the rules.
Yeah, absolutely. Even growing up, I used to draw my teachers and pass it around to my fellow classmates just to see if I could make them laugh out loud.
Cartoonist Marty Tubles. After a long year of staying home, children are going to camp in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Elias Chavez reports.
The water helps the crops.
Small hands pushing and pulling a piece of clay to mold into a pot. That's what the children at the traditional teachings camp are doing. The students here are learning about Pueblo ways of life at the first camp held since the coronavirus pandemic began.
It's really a blessing because we didn't get to have this camp last year, and so it's so nice having the students come back.
Organizers at this 4-day summer camp, hosted by the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, have created activities to promote cultural learning. Every day, students start their day spending time in the Resilience Garden, learning about seeds and the agricultural ways of Pueblo communities.
It's important for our youth to share our knowledge, especially for our urban Indian youth that don't get they don't have the ability to go back to their homelands, especially now during COVID.
The camp includes Native and non-Native children, something organizers say teaches cultural humility by exposing children to another lifestyle. On this day, campers learned from Claudia Mitchell, a potter from Acoma Pueblo. The project was heartwarming for her.
Being with the little kids, it's just so much energy, and it's like, they're just so eager and they want to do things right away. It's like, that's one thing about making potters, like you need to learn patience, and eventually, maybe one or two of them will grow up and, be able to carry it on.
Making pottery is a favorite for campers who attend every year. In Albuquerque, Aaliyah Chavez, Indian Country Today.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For more news and updates, visit IndianCountryToday.com. Stay safe and have a great weekend. I'm Mark Trahan.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run. This is Indian Country Today.